we have this third election coming up now, which is Teresa May calling a snap election. And that's because, you know, we're told that that's because she's absolutely guaranteed a victory. But no, I'm not of that mind at all, because this might not go the way they plan. And if it doesn't go the way they plan, she would have signed Article 50, and she could have damaged our relationship with Europe. But if Marine Le Pen, or a candidate that's pro-Brexit, doesn't get in France, it could leave Britain very isolated. And and that's a very realistic scenario, you know. And you know, I just want you to look at this video here. That's a scene of Margaret Thatcher collapsing. It's 1982. You know, it was about 3 or 4 months. I forget all the dates here. You know what I mean? But loosely, you can research it a little bit. But it was a good 3 or 4 months after the Falklands War, and you see her legs collapsing underneath her because she'd gone into the Great Hall of the people in what was Peking. It was Beijing now, and she'd gone in there brazenly. She'd missed vital negotiations the day before, and because she just wanted to meet Deng Xiaoping, and she hadn't really realised that Deng Xiaoping wasn't the head of China. He was head of the party that runs China, the political party that runs China, and it's different. You know, he was more like a spiritual leader or something like that than a, you know, he maybe not the correct terminology actually for Deng Xiaoping, the patriot at the time, but maybe far from it actually. But he was the, you know, sits in a high position. He's the head of the party, not the country. You could argue the same thing, but the actual decisions of the country are made by those heads of state. They're the people you have to negotiate with. And she when that was approached, it was just along the lines, we'll deal with that tomorrow when I speak to Deng Xiaoping. And she kind of missed it. And by the time she turned up to meet Deng Xiaoping, it was all decided. It was over with. Hong Kong was going back to China, lock, stock and barrel. And of course, you know, in the original agreement, you know, the Chinese had basically stopped Britain fighting in, well, it was a 99-year lease, so it would have been 1898. In the lead up to that, you know, that they'd suddenly said, look, hey, why don't you just have Hong Kong forever? That's right, forever. And we'll stop fighting. We want to trade. You want to trade. You know, this just seems crazy. We're just going to go into war. It's not good for you. It's not good for us. You know, we're willing to let you have that forever if you'll stop fighting. And to sweeten the deal, we'll give you 10 times more land as well, which was the new territories, on a 99-year lease, just to keep you calm, and so you know we're all on the same side, blah, 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 blah. And of course, it completely and utterly destroyed Britain's war antics. You know, the Chinese more than knew how the British negotiated, so they found ways around our kind of warring. You know, when we go into war, we really aren't we aren't pleasant, which is probably why we had such a strong empire. And it was Pym who was actually her, I can't remember his first name, Francis Pym or something. He was the one who, he actually saw the actual whole thing with China, and I think he had his eyes on the kind of divorce honeypot anyway. But he also realised what had happened in the Korean War. You know, in the Korean War, we'd seen the Americans enter into the Korean War just when the Koreans were on their knees in 1950, and kind of push the Koreans right back to almost annihilation. And then then of course the Americans entered, and they started started fighting what are now the North Koreans, the communist parties. And of course that's when the Chinese came in. And of course they mostly came in with just pitchforks. They literally sent men in with pitchforks to such a massive volume that they pushed the Americans back. And Americans lost 35,000 lives against men with pitchforks. They just couldn't believe it. Just that amount, you could send that amount of, and no one knows how many Chinese died. There's loads of different figures, but they won't ever release the real figures, so it's just a guesswork. But you can just imagine against what was, you know, modern warfare in that time, big machine guns, all the rest of it, everything, and they weren't a match against men with pitchforks. You know, so you can imagine that Francis Pym was kind of like he was nervous about sort of like going to war with China, especially after the amount of ships they just lost in the Falklands War, and just for what some said was a herd of sheep. Obviously, we have the stories of what's happening in the Antarctica now, and sort of like that play a bigger part in that story, and there's lots of other stuff there that we're actually we are opening, like we've just discovered that the seventh continent might actually be new, that we all thought went under the oceans, that it never went under the oceans, it just floated down to the right southern point of our world and has been happily there running things from afar whilst we've just been completely unaware. And that's what it's sounding like, isn't it? It's sounding like we've just discovered it's new, it's still here, and it always has been here, and we just missed it.
强硬的铁娘子携福克兰群岛的威风而来，她没有想到会碰到更硬的钢铁公司。她意识到
You know, Margaret Thatcher, she hated the EU. She didn't want to be part of it, and you know, she was the original Brexiteer. And I think it's surprising how many people hadn't realised that they were very, very strong Thatcherites all along with their kind of like Brexiteer kind of mentality. And it could, just listen to this little bit of footage. This was, I forget his name, the foreign minister at the time of that ended her career, Geoffrey Howe.
It was the late Lord Stockton, formerly Harold Macmillan, who first put the central point clearly. As long ago as 1962, he argued that we had to place and keep ourselves within the European community. He saw it as essential then, as it is today, not to cut ourselves off from the realities of power, not to retreat into a ghetto of sentimentality about our past, and so diminish our own control over our own destiny in the future.
His resignation speech is what destroyed Margaret Thatcher's career, and ultimately that's what ended it. And it's worth just listening. I'm just going to play a little excerpt from this, because if you're a Brexiteer, you want to hear this, because you've got a vote coming up.
The Prime Minister's perceived attitude towards Europe is running increasingly serious risks for the future of our nation. It risks minimising our influence and maximising our chances of being once again shut out. We've paid heavily in the past for late starts and squandered opportunities in Europe. We dare not let that happen again. If we detach ourselves completely, as a party or as a nation, from the middle ground of Europe, the effects will be incalculable and very hard ever to correct.
I think I'm going to leave it on this and let you decide on, because you've got a vote coming up, and I can't express to you, you know, if we leave Europe, if the EU collapses, there's a lot of superpower disappears off the map, and lots of little vulnerable countries are just sitting there, and you'll be forced to sign a lot of agreements that human rights will have little say. You really want to listen to this. This is from a Tory, one of the big thinking Tories of the time, supposedly, who put together the ERM. The ERM? I think the European Exchange Rate Mechanism. So I guess that is the ERM. Do you remember that? I can remember that, but I didn't have a clue what it all meant back in the day. But it was the way in which, say, how the franc links up with the euro. It was a similar method that would have now enabled the pound, because the franc hasn't disappeared. The franc is still there. It's just levied up with and connected with the euro, and that would have been the same for the pound. And the European exchange rate mechanism was put together so Britain could enter the euro. And Margaret Thatcher scuttled that at the last moment and destroyed our chances of being part of that. And that's when this thing really started. And I think I personally believe that now is the time that we could really reverse all of that. We've got a snap election, because she hasn't done this election because she's really powerful at the moment. I believe she's put this election on because she doesn't want to be at the helm if the milk goes sour. If Brexit doesn't happen, she does not want to be at the helm of Britain, and then we're going to have to renegotiate entry, but that will be very, very difficult because you're going to have a lot of angry people that want UK independence, and what will likely come out of that, it's very difficult to say, but what could actually come out of all of this in this big split argument is everything that people were shouting out in the initial instance: total UK independence. That is, you know, no one knows how this is going to unfold. You know, like I say, we've just seen like America deliver a state, you know, switch on or activate a state-of-the-art defense system in South Korea, and immediately the Russians have just, you know, activated their similar kind of like sophisticated missile defense system, the S-300s or whatever they're called, and probably S-400 or whatever they are. I don't know if there is an S-400. You know, I think there is, or something like that. I can remember hearing those terms battered around in the when the missile defense shields were delivered to Iran when all this began. We're seeing the power that America and Britain are pushing up to claim the same economic hegemony that Margaret Thatcher talked about, that she always pushed for, that we won the war, that we deserve it, and everyone else should bow down. And we're seeing other superpowers coming forward. Yeah, it could collapse Europe, and Europe could fall away, and then we're forced into a massive great conflict, or it might not work. And so we come back to this image. If you've got a vote coming up, vote carefully. That's all I can tell you. These are very big times, and they're very real times, and at some point or other, each and every one of you is going to completely wake up to the fact that you are completely alive right now, and this is really happening, and you've been sitting on the fence, especially if you're not a non-voter and you've not been engaging in your rights to vote. You've been missing out on a lot of opportunity, and now this snap election is coming up, and what a difficult situation. What a difficult situation. Good luck. Take care. I'll get back to you at a later stage if I can ever work out how this is going to go. I think only time will tell, as they say, you know, time will tell.